What is it that makes bell ringers so passionate about ringing bells? In this final episode of the Fun with Bells podcast, I reveal what I've learned over the past 75 episodes. I'm Cathy Booth, a non-ringer with a bell-ringing husband who started this podcast nearly 6 years ago to find out what makes bell ringing such an all-consuming hobby. This episode takes an audio extract from each of the previous episodes. I've themed them under 6 main headings: skills, community, history, travel, well-being and teaching. Firstly, skills. People who don't ring usually underestimate the physical ability and mental agility required to ring bells.
An awful lot of people think they're very easy to play, and they're not at all. There is a huge technique in playing a handbell.
You're controlling a fast-moving piece of metal to split-second accuracy using a very long springy rope that disappears through a hole in the ceiling.
Bell ringers are motivated by the challenge of mastering these unique and complex skills.
The things that are hard to do and are worth doing often take a long time to get the basics under your belt.
I'd say for people who are learning, try not to rush, because if you haven't mastered your backstroke or handstroke, it's very hard to put them together. And as you go later on down the line, if you haven't learned it properly, you'll get people telling you that's not how you're meant to ring. And then you'll have to relearn it, which creates a huge pause.
Don't give up. Keep persevering.
Yeah.
Because it's like that thing, is you 3 steps forward, 5 back, couple forward, 4 back.
Learning to ring well takes a very, very long time. It's not something that you can pick up and be excellently good at in 6 weeks. So if you're ambitious, you want to make progress, go out and find the opportunities, but be patient and consolidate at every stage.
Bell ringers first learn to handle a bell on their own, then they ring with others in an ever-increasing complexity of patterns called methods.
I came to tower bell ringing relatively late by British terms, but it was something that required physical coordination that I could do. And I was never good at anything requiring physical coordination. And it has provided a lifetime of learning. I haven't stopped learning yet.
I like learning the patterns. I enjoy playing chess and bridge and Scottish country dancing and Fair Isle knitting. I enjoy patterns, crosswords, puzzles, jigsaws, and bell ringing is just more of that. And it's more of it, but it's always developing, because for me, one of the great joys of ringing is that you can always try a bit harder and learn something more complicated, or perform the same piece better, get your striking better, or be of more help to the other ringers that are struggling to learn that method. It's just tremendous fun, hugely addictive.
These methods are sometimes mixed or spliced together.
I like ringing spliced. About 100 of my peals have been spliced surprise major, and about the same number spliced surprise minor, including 40 of 41 spliced, which is one of the sort of things that surprise minor ringers like to ring.
I'm ringing 2 or 3 times a day with various groups of people, and some of the ringing we're doing is very challenging, so I'm feeling personally challenged, and I find the whole process quite enjoyable.
Determining the order of the bells for these methods, which have to adhere to precise rules, can also be challenging and mathematically rewarding. Tony Ayres discovered some 200 previously unrecognised doubles place methods in the 1980s.
Andrew Johnson, who rang and jointly composed the first Bob's Only peal of step and triples.
But bell ringing is way more than just a technical hobby. Yes, you need to learn how to ring the bells, but it's clear that community is a massive part of it. Firstly, they talk about how welcoming everyone is and how you can make great friends.
Bell ringers are really one big community, and because it's so open and so sociable, you can make very good friends through ringing very easily.
Something that comes straight to mind is the community aspect of bell ringing, which is something I really love because I'm more of a nomadic ringer at the minute. I bounce around different towers in London, and what I really love is being able to come into any tower and feel completely welcome and supported, and it's a really lovely environment to come into.
And a tip for using social media was to advertise that bell ringing fosters a sense of community and belonging.
So I think for most bell ringers, that's the thing to sell, because someone is looking at that post thinking, would I like to join this group? Would I like to join this team? And if you're true to your personality, then that's going to be the thing that shines through and that pulls people in.
And bell ringing can provide a sense of connection and belonging without requiring a high level of social interaction, offering a sense of community to those who may prefer a less extroverted approach.
You can be a ringer with other people, but not feel you have to participate socially. I thought that's really quite interesting, and I think that looks after a lot of people. So teamwork, without you necessarily having to be sociable, but obviously many people are.
That's the good thing about ringing, isn't it? There's something there for everybody. So there's something for the engineers, there's something for the musicians, there's something for the socialites. There really is something for everybody.
This community even stretches across the globe, some of the time.
Zanzab is a bit like the North American Guild in that we're part of the ringing community, but also we're separate. And we both have this ambivalent feeling that sometimes, yes, we're very much part of the international ringing community, and it is a great community. Other times we think everyone in the UK has completely forgotten we exist, and we feel a bit left out in the cold.
Friendships and teamwork matter in bell ringing.
It says something about any hobby that you really enjoy, that if you do it with people you get on with and there's a common sense of purpose and teamwork, my goodness, you can have tremendous fun together, and it forges great friendships. And these friendships have been one of the most enriching things in our lives.
I think from my point of view, I've enjoyed that camaraderie and the teamwork aspect of it.
And here's a pretty good example of how close you can become with the people you ring with.
And we were away from our ropes when Graham suddenly called Look To, and everybody stopped talking, and I wondered why he called Look To, because he doesn't ring the treble. And the next thing, he started this wonderful speech that he hadn't rehearsed or practiced, and he was saying such lovely things, and he asked me to marry him. And it was a complete surprise on the day.
Bell ringers have a shared passion.
My favourite bit about bell ringing is the social aspect, how there's so many bell ringers and we're all like the same thing. But I also like the theory side of it.
The bell ringers that I worked with, they were very enthusiastic about bringing the focus onto bell ringing and showing people what bell ringing is all about.
And bell ringers believe it is a privilege to contribute to their local communities through bell ringing.
So it does give a feeling of satisfaction that you can visibly see an improvement and you can hear an improvement in your ringers. And I think that is hugely satisfying. And it's been satisfying as well I think it has helped to bring the community together in Brierley Hill.
Ringing has given me the chance to become a real part of my village community. So I was very fortunate that when Dame Vera Lynn died, I was able to ring for her funeral and to stand there ringing as my entire village stood outside the church was just something else, and something that I don't think you can match anywhere.
I feel very privileged to give something back to the community by ringing for services, weddings, funerals and other special occasions.
Bell ringers understand that there is a significance in what they're doing, not just for themselves and the others who are ringing, but for those who are listening.
I do think the bells sound very joyous. A ring of 12 bells, and if you're in the vicinity and you hear them, they give people pleasure. Glad to be part of that.
There's something about managing that bell, that lovely, resonant, traditional English noise that's been around for years and years, and you're doing it. You're not just doing it on your own, you're doing it with other people.
The bells were about to ring along with all the bells across the world. And I took hold of my bell, and I must admit I did have a bit of a wobbly bottom lip for a moment, just thinking about the sheer impact of all of these people, all of these bells that are about to ring at 12:30 at the same time. And I had a little bit to do with that.
Bell ringers are often attracted by the related history and traditions.
Every tower tells a story. What I love, you can go up and you can see in the belfry and see all of these little pieces of history that no one ever gets to see. like the different frame and bell installations and things like peel boards hidden up in old ringing chambers and old equipment lurking about, old bits of wheel and headstock and things laying about. I find it all interesting.
As you step into the base of the tower, look up to the collection of hats from previous tower captains dating back to 1716, which are fixed high up on the wall just beneath the ringing room.
I think the most fascinating thing I've found is that in many towers, the ringing chamber hasn't always been in the same location as it is now, because during the 18th century, it was common practice for towers to have gallery rings, which were often shared with the organ or the band if a church had one. But during the 1870s, something called belfry reform, these were taken out.
I'm genuinely interested in trying to understand what ringing was like in the past. We tend to assume that it was like it is now, so most people don't think about getting paid for ringing, except for the occasional wedding. But from my researches, it seems that if you go back 100 or 200 years, actually the payment was quite an important reason why some people rang.
There's a very interesting story that highlights the dispute that went on between ringers and the church during the 17 and 1800s. In 1863, the ringers broke into the church to ring for the marriage of the then Prince of Wales, who later became Edward VII, against the wishes of the vicar at St Peter's.
According to local tradition, a relative of a former rector, one Colonel Brown, had led one of the famous cavalry charges at Waterloo. One of his chief delights was to take a barrel of beer into the church on each anniversary of the battle for the refreshment of the ringers who rang on that occasion. The rector disapproved of this and so constructed the awkward means of approach to the ringing chamber by which it would be entirely impossible to introduce a barrel.
While these facts and stories offer a glimpse into the quirky traditions of bell ringing, the outbreak of World War II cast a shadow over it.
On June 14th, 1940, an order in council was made prohibiting the ringing or chiming of church bells, except by the military or the police, as a notification of the landing of enemy troops by air. We, as ringers, have a special deprivation, for we are debarred from that activity we most delight in.
What the bells of England really mean to the people of England we should never have known without these 3 years of silence. The victory ringing of last November was a most surprising revelation. The dramatic announcement of the ringing by the Prime Minister at the climax of his great speech, we have had continued and abundant evidence that church bells mean much in the life of this country.
While the sound of bells can deeply affect people, how the bells are made is equally fascinating.
This large Victorian bell foundry, fulfilling its original purpose, which makes it quite rare. It's grade 2 star. The star means what's inside it is listed as well, and considerable significance.
Making bells shows off how skilled and creative people are, but bells have also picked up many myths and legends over the years.
Given that church bells are steeped in mysticism and folklore, it's unsurprising that for centuries many have believed them to have magical or healing powers. The custom of blessing or baptizing new bells before anointing them with holy oils was undertaken in order to make sure the devil would flee whenever they were sounded.
Located east of Hawley in Surrey is the 12th century double-moated site of Thunderfield Castle, said to be the resting place for Harold's army as he marched towards the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Locals have reported that at sunset on the 11th of November, ghostly bells can be heard tolling, gradually getting louder and louder until midnight, when the ghosts of Harold's army marches through the area.
Like these ghostly apparitions, bell ringers have also recreated historical events.
On the 2nd of July, we dressed up as Edwardian ladies for the year 1912 to ring at Desford, St Martin's, for the Desford Heritage Festival, which was a centenary.
Whilst taking part in an Edwardian reenactment lets those experience the restrictions of the clothes of the past, the discovery of an old newspaper article settles a dispute.
I ring a Battersea church, and the bells there were cast at the other side of the River Thames. And there's a great debate over many years about whether the bells were brought across the river by boat or over the old wooden bridge at Battersea. And we managed to come across a newspaper extract describing the bells coming over the wooden bridge with the band and everything else.
Bell ringers really enjoy how bell ringing gives them the chance to travel to unique places and connect with local cultures.
It really is an amazing hobby. It gets you into places that most people would never get to, in bell towers, in churches and cathedrals and town halls across the country. And I certainly can do without it.
I probably wouldn't have been able to travel, or wouldn't have travelled as extensively as I have and seen so many beautiful parts of the world.
I've rung in 5,785 towers, of which about 100 are abroad, and I've only got about 7 or 8 in the UK that I haven't rung at. It's great. It's fun. You'll get hooked. You'll see places that you'd never see if you didn't ring, and it's a great challenge. It's a never-ending challenge.
I've been to some pretty spectacular places.
Went to
Washington
America,
National Cathedral,
yeah.
that was incredible. And the Post Office Tower, they're incredible.
We were fortunate enough to go on a trip to the Antarctic, happened to be there with some other ringers, and we rang handbell peal on the boat just off the coast of Antarctica and just off the coast of South America, which completed a peal in every continent, which I was quite pleased about because travelling is my other love apart from bell ringing.
Ringing a set of bells on the back of a tugboat and almost ringing a peal on the back of a lorry are quite interesting.
I would never have gone to Singapore but for handbell ringing.
The outings, the competitions, there's just so much to offer, and the different towers you get to ring at, you get to travel everywhere, you just get to meet so many new people. It's just an amazing thing to be part of.
And social connections formed are a vital part of the journey.
You will make friends for life to begin with. Ringers make fantastic friends. You will go out on outings and go to places that you'd never think you'd ever go to.
One of the great things I like about ringing is the social aspect of it. And it's wonderful that nearly 50 years later, I can still go back to the same ring of bells when I'm visiting my family in Kent and find that there are people there who I have known all that time.
Bell ringing put me in contact with people who helped me understand that there was a lot more to life. They introduced me to structures of civic society. They introduced me to the Ancient Society of College Youth. They introduced me to ringing all over the country.
Every time I go ringing somewhere, there's this competing tension between I want to be ringing and I want to be working on my practice, but there are also fascinating people there who know a lot about ringing and who know a lot about other things.
And their passion for ringing opens the door to incredible travel opportunities.
I get to go to some absolutely amazing places across the country. Even just the ringing in Devon gets you to places where you would never, ever think about going. Going to places like the Cotswolds, ringing at places in Oxford, at a lot of the university colleges there, ringing at Fettes College, up in Edinburgh, in Scotland, all just fantastic things, really.
It's the opportunity to base your holidays around ringing. Cape Cod, Vernay in the south of France, Dordrecht, and the intimacy that brings, and meeting up with the locals.
For some, travelling to different towers also allows them to explore their other interests.
I've rung at over 1,500 towers, and I've been into the belfries of quite a few of these, as well as several I haven't actually rung at. But when I do visit somewhere, I tend to keep my eyes open for insects, mammals and birds.
Bell ringers note a beneficial effect of bell ringing on their well-being.
As one gets older, I think that the brain finds things more of a challenge, and also physically you find things more of a challenge. Having come to it very late in life, I'm finding that there is no doubt it's a great workout. It's helped enormously in terms of my physical agility, but probably more importantly, my wife will say that I've become a much more rejuvenated person.
It's the mental side of things as well. And I've also taken mindfulness, and this is one very good skill that you can use while you're bell ringing because it takes up your whole concentration. So yes, it's very good, not only physically, but mentally as well.
I love how it keeps all of my brain busy. So every cycle that my brain has is totally taken up by thinking about what's going on. And if you ever get bored, there's more to think about, whether it's thinking about the coursing orders or the composition or thinking about exactly who is making that same mistake, and whether it's me in the third part of the lead or whatever it is. There's always something to keep your mind occupied, and it feels very meditative to me, in addition to feeling very social.
So bell ringing is really satisfying because it's mentally challenging. It's like the harder you have to work at it, the more you get out of it in the end.
It can make your ringing so much more enjoyable if you feel you're doing something that's relatively unconscious and you can just enjoy the moment and the oneness with the bell.
And to help enjoy your bell ringing moments, you need to be able to relax.
When you're relaxed, then you feel so much better about things and things happen much more naturally. I think the worst thing when you catch hold of a rope, if you do so with anxiety, I'm not sure it's a good place to start from, but when you relax, just let it happen, it tends to work better.
Many bell ringers find that the activity has a positive effect not only on themselves, but on those around them too.
I ring primarily because it puts out so much wonderful positive energy for the other ringers around, for listeners and for the wider collective. But I also ring because it's therapeutic. It has a healing effect on me and the other ringers. I also ring because it's a good way to exercise and it's a good way of getting to know so many other people. It's really widened my social network.
And bell ringing can have a positive effect on a young person's confidence.
Pupils still remembered the pride they felt in bell ringing for school assemblies, and for one or two young people who I think hadn't found anything they could be praised for, found this life transforming. And I met one of them a couple of years ago, and she's not a different person, but she's a much more confident person and has done some amazing things. And that was on the back of that first step of confidence.
Some bell ringers really enjoy sharing their knowledge with others.
There's a lot of satisfaction in seeing somebody progress. Sometimes it's that little click that says, oh, I understand that. And when you get that moment, it's worth a lot.
To me, I enjoy training as much as going course peeling.
We enjoy teaching. Right at the beginning, you find it's a hectic task, but the joy that we get is seeing people knowing how to ring. It really gives us joy.
I really get my enjoyment from teaching people, both the basics. It's just great to watch them progress, and you can relive yourself the joy you had as you made progress at that. And more importantly, in the more advanced stages, to make it possible for people who get to the level of doing call changes, that they can, if they wish, progress further, and also ensure that those who don't wish are still valued and realise that their importance is as much as anybody else's.
ART, the Association of Ringing Teachers, gives bell ringers tools and techniques to teach ringing.
We managed to recruit 18 learners in our first year. Those 18 learners have all now achieved their Association of Ringing Teachers level 1, and some have moved on to level 2.
I saw two people arguing very strongly about whether art was a good thing or art was a bad thing. And I was thinking, I don't know what art is, because it all started whilst I was not involved in ringing at all. So at that point, being curious, I thought I'm going to go on one of those art courses, and I went, and I was a convert straight away. I thought this is a really wonderful thing.
At the art conference, we picked up many tips on what to say to new learners.
Keep calm, listen to what we say, don't be concerned if you think you're not making rapid progress. We are trying to help you become competent ringers by breaking things down into small steps for you, and keep at it.
ART has also put together a call changes course.
It was very daunting trying to put together a scheme where you're not an expert yourself in Devon call changes, but trying to open that out to the rest of the ringing fraternity.
Bell ringers have used technology to help teach others.
We had 5 or 6 groups of potential learners. Each course consisted of 5 PowerPoint hours with Zoom and using Ringing Room. And then we would introduce the potential ringers to their tower captain during the course and say, please go along and meet your captain and start being taught how to ring a bell. And without exception, they were all very enthusiastic and pleased to have gone into a tower, and a lot of wonderment on people's faces. Such things go on in a tower. They were delighted.
Young people quite like competition, and with the simulator software that's around nowadays, you can get results for things like striking. So how accurate are they when they're ringing rounds for 5 minutes? And it will give them all sorts of statistics and graphs.
Maybe bell ringing is unusual in that sometimes the same person can be a teacher and at other times a learner.
Some towers, it was very much, oh, David, that's good to see you here. Now, because you're here, we can ring this that we couldn't without you. And can you help this learner and stand by them and give them some assistance? And maybe you could call this touch of something or other. And I was very much a helper or a teacher. And then I'd go along to another tower and it was exactly the other way around. And they said, oh, look, David's asked, he'd really like to try and ring Bristol Major or something, and he's very wobbly on it, so let's do it just for him, and we'll all try and help him through and nod wisely at him and try and keep him right. So you're very much learning from people who are more experienced and better than you are, and also teaching people and helping people who haven't got as far as you have. And I think that's something that's very unusual and special about ringing, and I think it's marvellous.
I hope you enjoyed this recap of the podcast. As I sign off, I'm really thankful for all the things that I've learnt and the experiences I've had as host of the Fun with Bells podcast. I want to thank all of the wonderful people who've helped me along the way. There are too many to mention individually. 163 podcast guests, all the people that sent me feedback, those that have provided me with audio and video clips, and those who've helped me with the quizzes that required technical expertise. I'd particularly like to thank my sponsors, Jessica Wood for chipping in with the hardware costs, and the Association of Ringing Teachers for their generosity in paying the ongoing costs. Without their generosity, the podcast wouldn't have been possible. If you're interested in learning to ring, improve your skills, or even learning to teach, then do go to the Association of Ringing Teachers website, bellringing.org. There's loads of useful resources to help ringers at all levels. I'd like to thank my mentors, Leslie Belcher and my husband, Roger Booth, for helping me brainstorm ideas and giving me access to their contacts. I'd also like to thank the team. Firstly, John Gwynn and Anne Tansley-Thomas, who've been with me since the beginning. John for his quality reviews, and Anne for her show notes and takeaways. They're wonderful. Thanks, Anne. And also my later recruits, Emily Roderick, whose artwork has helped with the podcast. She's helped with social media, brainstorming ideas, and lots more. And Emily Watts, who's helped with the transcripts, together with Deb Margson-Baker, who's helped me recently with humorous posts to social media. And of course, to all of you, the listeners, without whom there wouldn't be a podcast. I'm excited for the future of bell ringing, with so many dedicated and talented people working on new and innovative ways to take this wonderful tradition through to the future generations. Maybe one day there'll be another podcast about bell ringing, and the new podcast host can start their journey into the wonderful world of bell ringing and its fantastic community. Until then, happy ringing. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it. This podcast was put together by a team. Special thanks go to Anne Tansley-Thomas, Emily Roderick, John Gwynn, Emily Watts, and for the video at the end of the show of the Ringing by the Lily Putters Guild, YouTuber Simon Edwards. Thank you.